I knew I'd made a mistake the moment I stepped through their door. The silence wasn't warm. It was the kind that waits to judge. Patricia opened it with her usual too wide smile, the kind that stretches but doesn't reach the eyes. "Oh, Helen, we didn't think you'd actually make it. Come in, come in." She barely stepped aside, already turning to walk away. I stood on the welcome mat a moment longer than I should have, holding a small bag with my book and scarf, the only things I'd brought. Nothing wrapped, nothing festive, nothing they wanted. I didn't bring anything this year. No pies, no wine, no gifts. After all, they never said thank you. Not last Christmas, not the one before. When you're 78, you start paying attention to what doesn't get said. Gregory didn't get up from the couch. My son, my only child. He looked over his shoulder, muttered, "Hey, Ma," and turned back to the football game. I hadn't seen him since Easter. I nodded, trying to catch his eye, but he didn't bother to mute the TV. The house smelled of cinnamon and sugar, clove-studded ham, something cheesy baking in the oven. It should have been comforting. But it wasn't my house anymore. It hadn't been for a long time, though I had the paperwork to say otherwise. Emily, my youngest granddaughter, walked past without a word, glued to her phone. The older one, Sadie, gave me a tight-lipped, "Hi, Grandma," and disappeared into the kitchen. I caught a glimpse of the dining room. 12 seats, all set. My place wasn't one of them. I took off my coat and laid it on the arm of a chair. No one offered to hang it. No one asked how I got here. I'd driven myself, like always. The Toyota's engine had rattled all the way up the hill. "Oh," Patricia called from the kitchen, voice bright with sarcasm. "You didn't bring the fig cake this year? Or your famous yams?" "No," I said simply, walking toward the living room. I thought I'd bring myself for once. There was a pause. Not long, just a beat. But I heard it. The way her spoon hit the counter just a bit too hard. Dinner was served at 6:30 sharp. I was told, "You can sit there," pointing to the folding chair at the end of the table, pulled slightly away, like an afterthought. No one raised a glass when I sat. They talked over me, around me. Gregory told stories from work, something about bonuses and layoffs. And Patricia laughed too loud at everything he said. No one asked me about anything. Not how I was feeling. Not about the snowfall in my neighborhood. Not about the new neighbor who fell and broke her hip last week. When the plates were cleared, Patricia passed out presents. Boxes with sleek wrapping, bows tied just so. A few from them. A few from Santa. None addressed to me. Sadie unwrapped a new phone and mumbled thanks without looking up. Emily opened perfume, wrinkled her nose, and handed it to her mother. Gregory received golf shoes. I watched each gesture, each glance, wondering when I had become invisible. At one point, Patricia clinked her glass. "Let's toast," she said, "to family, and to everyone who contributes something." She looked right at me as she said it, smiling. The girls laughed. Gregory didn't stop her. I didn't cry. Not then. I waited. When it was over, I helped collect the plates. No one noticed. I thanked Patricia for dinner. She just nodded. Gregory kissed my cheek distractedly and said, "Drive safe." I drove back through the cold, the kind of night that pulls tight around your bones. The streets were mostly empty. Christmas lights blinked in windows. Inside, people were laughing, holding hands, playing music. At home, I turned on a single lamp in the living room and took off my shoes. I stood a long while by the fireplace, looking at the framed deed on the wall. The one with my name on it. Gregory's house. Or so he thought. Tomorrow, I would call Martin Holloway. He'd been our lawyer for 30 years, handled the will when my husband passed, drew up the trust, advised me to keep things in my name, just in case. I never thought I'd need that advice, but tomorrow I'd bring the lawyer. And this house, the one they laughed in, the one they lived in like I didn't exist, would remind them exactly whose name was on the title. I couldn't sleep that night. The silence in my house was different from theirs. It was kind, gentle, not laced with tension or judgment. I sat by the fireplace with a cup of lukewarm tea, still in the navy sweater I'd worn to dinner, though the collar felt tighter now, like even it didn't want to be near my skin. The laughter at the table kept looping in my head. To everyone who contributes something. The words rang louder in the quiet than they had in that crowded room. It wasn't the first time they'd made me feel like a ghost at my own family's table. But something shifted this time. Not in them, no, they were exactly the same. It was me. I was done pretending. I set the tea down and opened the drawer of the sideboard where I kept the old documents. Not out of distrust, but habit. Folders labeled in my late husband's handwriting. House, deed, will, trust. We were always meticulous about paperwork. I took out the folder marked House. The paper inside was slightly yellowed, the ink faded, but still clear. Property title, Helen Marie Atwood. Dated July 18th, 1993. Gregory had just gotten married back then. Patricia was a bubbly 24-year-old who wore shoulder pads and lip gloss and called me Mrs. Atwood for the first year. They didn't have a penny to their name. David, my husband, suggested we buy them a house. Not buy for them, he clarified. Buy and let them live there. So we did. The place on Carver Hill, 4 bedrooms, wraparound porch, decent bones. It needed work, but David fixed most of it himself before his second heart attack. We moved them in that November. They never asked whose name was on the papers. Or maybe they assumed. People assume all sorts of things when you're quiet and kind. After David passed, I updated the deed and the trust with our lawyer. Keep it in your name, Martin said, just in case circumstances change. He meant remarriage or financial hardship. He never said, in case your son turns into someone who forgets what respect looks like. But I heard it between the lines. I held the papers under the lamplight, brushing my fingers over the seal. Official, legal, binding. Let them laugh. Let them toast each other with their wine and smirks. The next morning, I called Martin's office. His assistant still remembered me. Helen Atwood, Mr. Holloway will be so glad to hear from you. She scheduled me for 2 o'clock that afternoon. I dressed deliberately. Gray slacks, black blouse, cardigan with silver buttons. I wore lipstick for the first time in months. The kind of outfit people notice. Not flashy, but grounded. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who'd stopped being afraid of conflict. The office hadn't changed much. Same wood paneling, same ticking clock on the wall. Martin looked older, didn't we all? But his eyes were as sharp as ever. Well, he said, clasping my hand, what brings you in? I told him everything, from the silent hello to the insult over dessert. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't cry. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, interlaced his fingers over his stomach, and sighed. They think the house is theirs? They live like it is. And they've never paid rent? Taxes? Never. He gave a low whistle. You want to reclaim it? I want them to know whose roof they're living under. I want them to remember decency. And I want options, legal, fair, but clear. Martin nodded slowly. We can serve a notice of reconsideration. Technically, you've allowed them to reside there under implied consent. That can be revoked. We'll need to send documentation, give them time to respond. But it's solid ground, Helen. It's your house. I didn't feel triumphant, only steady. He handed me a list of documents to sign and a copy for my own records. If you want me present when you deliver the news, I'll come. I thought for a moment. Then I nodded. Yes. I want them to hear it from someone with a briefcase. We shook hands. On the drive home, I passed by the Carver Hill house. Lights were on in the living room. Gregory's silhouette moved past the curtain. Christmas decorations still blinked in the window. Red and green, mechanical cheer. I didn't stop. They wouldn't see me coming next time, but they'd hear me loud and clear. They weren't expecting me at 10 o'clock in the morning. Patricia answered the door again, this time in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, hair pulled up messily, mascara smudged under her eyes. Behind her, the smell of reheated cinnamon rolls drifted through the hallway. Helen, she said, blinking, is everything okay? I smiled politely. I'd like to speak to Gregory. May I come in? Before she could respond, Martin stepped up beside me. His charcoal gray coat was buttoned tight, briefcase in hand, expression neutral, but firm. Patricia's eyes flicked to him, and I watched her mouth press into a thin line. Who's this? My attorney, I said. She opened the door wider without another word. Gregory was in the kitchen, still in pajama pants and slippers, his mug halfway to his mouth. He looked up, surprised. Ma? What's going on? Good morning, Gregory, Martin said calmly, walking in behind me. I'm Martin Holloway. I've represented your mother for a number of years. We'd like to sit down and have a brief discussion. I could see the shift in Gregory's posture, the slow, stiffening tension in his shoulders, the narrowing of his eyes. About what? Let's sit, I said, already moving toward the dining table where 12 people had eaten last night without so much as asking how I was. Martin opened his briefcase, placing 2 manila folders on the table. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He simply began. As you may or may not know, the property at 414 Carver Hill Road is legally owned by Mrs. Helen Atwood. The title has been in her name since its purchase in 1993. No transfer or sale has occurred since that time. Patricia was still standing, arms folded. Wait, what are you talking about? This is our house. No, Martin said, gently but firmly. It's not. Gregory glanced at me, and for a moment I saw something flicker across his face. Not fear, not yet, but the edge of it. I thought you gave it to us, he said. You and Dad bought it for us. No, I said. We bought it, and we let you live here. That was the agreement. Unspoken, maybe, but never transferred. Patricia's voice rose. But you never said anything. You've let us live here for 30 years. And I've paid the property taxes, I said. The insurance. I've covered repairs. You've never asked about the deed. I didn't think I had to explain it. Until now. Gregory stood. What is this? Some kind of punishment because of last night? That's petty, Ma. That's not like you. I looked at him. Truly looked. The lines around his mouth, the weariness in his jaw, the way he tried to dress authority over his guilt. You humiliated me at your table, I said, quietly. You laughed when I brought nothing. You made sure everyone saw that I wasn't welcome. Well, now I'm bringing something. The truth. Martin slid a sheet of paper across the table. This is a formal notice of revocation of consent for occupancy. In simple terms, your mother is withdrawing her permission for you to live in the house. Legally, you have 30 days to vacate unless an agreement is reached. Patricia's voice cracked. You're evicting your own son? I'm reminding him whose name is on the door. Gregory's face was red now. Jesus, Ma, this is crazy. Over a dinner? We were joking. No, I said. You weren't. He slammed his mug down. What do you even want? Money? Gratitude? We've done everything for you. Everything? I interrupted. You didn't even hang up my coat. The room was silent. Martin closed his folder. This doesn't have to be contentious. Mrs. Atwood is open to discussion, but not disrespect. You have 30 days. I suggest you take this time to think through your next steps. I stood. We'll talk again, but not like this. Not with shouting, I'll let myself out. Martin nodded to both of them, calm as ever. Patricia stood frozen, her mouth slightly open. Gregory didn't move. Outside, the sun was shining, absurdly bright for a December morning. As we walked back to the car, Martin touched my arm lightly. You okay? I nodded. For the first time in years. And I meant it. They didn't call that day. Not Gregory, not Patricia. Not even a text. But I knew the silence wouldn't last. By evening, I pictured them pacing in their kitchen, papers spread out, coffee cups abandoned mid-sip, voices rising. That house may have been theirs in their minds, but now the truth sat on their table in black and white. And truth, I've learned, has a way of sobering even the most confident liars. Meanwhile, I did what I always do when I need to clear my head. I cleaned, polished the baseboards, reorganized the pantry, swept under the radiators. Around 9, the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. 3 minutes later, it rang again. And again. Finally, I answered. Ma, Gregory said, his voice flat, controlled. We need to talk. Then talk, I said, sitting down at the kitchen table. You really filed this notice? You actually hired a lawyer? Over some joke at dinner? It wasn't about the dinner, I said calmly. It was about the last 10 years, maybe 20. The dinner was just the moment I realized I was done being quiet. He exhaled sharply. Patricia's in tears. The girls are scared. You blindsided us, Ma. No, I corrected. You just never imagined I'd stop putting up with it. Where do you expect us to go? He asked. We've lived here our whole marriage, our whole lives. And for 30 years, you've done so rent-free, tax-free, responsibility-free. That stops now. I heard him pacing. I imagined his hand running through his thinning hair, his jaw clenched. You're punishing us. I'm setting a boundary, I said. There's a difference. He was quiet for a beat. Can we come by tomorrow? Just talk? No lawyers. I considered. At noon. The line clicked. He'd hung up without saying goodbye. I stared at the phone for a while, then put it face down on the table. The silence returned, but this time it felt earned. The next day, they were 5 minutes early. Patricia wore makeup. Her earrings matched her sweater. She carried a pie, store-bought, still cold. Gregory was in a blazer, his eyes red but dry. They sat stiffly on my couch, hands clasped, a portrait of togetherness. I want to start by apologizing, Gregory said, for how things have felt lately, for last night. Felt, not where. I didn't know you were so upset, Patricia added. If we'd realized. I raised my hand. This isn't about pretending to patch things up. It's about honesty. She blinked. I'm trying to be honest. Then be honest, I said. Why didn't you ever ask whose name was on the house? Patricia looked to Gregory. He looked down. "We assumed," he said finally. "Yes, you did." Silence. "I don't want to fight," he added. "We have children, a life there. Upending it. It's cruel, Ma." "What's cruel," I said quietly, "is erasing someone while still using what they gave you, laughing in their face while sitting on their foundation. That's cruel." Patricia's voice wavered. "But if we have to leave, the girls—" "I haven't said you have to leave," I said. "I said we're going to change the arrangement. I'm taking back control. You'll pay rent. You'll sign a lease. You'll treat it like what it is. Not yours." Gregory stared. "You're charging your own son rent?" "I'm reminding my son that nothing is free, especially not people." He sat back, arms folded, his mouth a hard line. "Or," I continued, "you can choose to move. I won't stop you. But either way, I'm done being invisible." Patricia glanced at Gregory. Her lip trembled. "What about the girls?" he asked. "What are we supposed to tell them?" "Tell them the truth," I said. "That actions have consequences. That you can't build a home on someone else's name and then act like they don't matter." I stood. The conversation was over. They left without another word. The pie sat untouched on the counter. As I watched them pull away, I felt no pleasure in their discomfort, only clarity. For once, the house I stood in was mine in every sense, and that was enough. The voicemails began that evening. First it was Gregory. "Ma, I don't think you understand what this is doing. The girls were crying after we left. Patricia hasn't slept. You're ripping our family apart." Then Patricia, "I don't know what happened to you. This isn't like you, Helen. You've always been kind, generous. What changed? Did someone put you up to this? That lawyer of yours?" Their words were soft on the outside, but every message had a spine of guilt, shame, and blame. I didn't answer. I listened, then deleted each one. By the third day, they switched tactics. Sadie called. "Grandma?" Her voice was small. "Dad says you're upset. I don't know what's going on, but can we come visit? Just me and Emily?" I hesitated. I loved those girls, even if they'd grown up in a house where my name was rarely spoken with warmth. But I wouldn't let Gregory use them as messengers. "Not today, sweetheart," I said gently. "But soon, I promise." There was a pause. Did we do something wrong? My heart clenched. "No, darling, this isn't about you." Later, I heard from Emily, too. A short, stilted voicemail. "Hey, Grandma. Just wanted to say I hope you're okay. Dad's really stressed." So's Mom. But I guess that's all. Bye. By Thursday, the tone shifted. "You're being unreasonable," Gregory snapped in a message. "You could have just talked to us. You didn't have to humiliate us like this. I have colleagues, friends, who know where we live. You're making us look like freeloaders." I stared at the phone. The word echoed. Freeloaders. He said it, not me. But it fit, didn't it? A few hours later, Patricia sent an email. Long, overwritten, full of wounded phrasing and little digs. "We've always tried to include you. Maybe you didn't see it that way. I'm sorry you felt left out, but that doesn't justify upending our lives. Maybe you're forgetting how much we've supported you too. The grocery runs, the doctor's visits. Family is supposed to forgive. We're asking for that now." I didn't reply. Let them stew. Let them sit in the reality they never imagined I'd force them to see. I knew what would come next. The storm always shifts before it breaks. Sure enough, Friday morning, Gregory showed up at my door. Alone. He didn't ring, just knocked, twice, firmly. I watched him through the peephole. Tired eyes, stiff shoulders, hands buried in his coat pockets. I opened it a sliver. Gregory. Ma. We stared at each other. I don't want to fight, he said. I just want to talk. I stepped aside. He entered like a man crossing into enemy territory. He didn't sit, just stood near the fireplace, looking at the photos on the mantel. Remember this one? He said, pointing to a beach picture. Him at 12, grinning, soaked to the bone, David lifting him by the arms. I remember, he sighed. What happened to us? I folded my hands. Life? Choices? Silence? He turned. I'm trying here. I'm not perfect. But this whole eviction threat, it's too far. It's not a threat, I said. It's a fact. You raised me better than this. I raised you to respect people, especially the ones who built the life you stand on. You forgot that. His jaw tightened. You're punishing my whole family. I'm holding you accountable. There's a difference. He took a step closer. If you do this, you won't see the girls. Patricia won't allow it. You'll be cut off. There it was, the veiled threat. I met his eyes. You're free to choose your actions, Gregory, and I'm free to choose mine. If that's the path you want, if using my grandchildren as pawns is how you protect your pride, then go ahead. He blinked. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, but only for a moment. I'll talk to Patricia, he said stiffly. Maybe we can come to terms. You can talk to Martin, I said. That's where we are now. He nodded once, sharply, and left without another word. The door closed. The silence returned. But this time, I wasn't alone in it. This time, I had my dignity. And that was more than enough. They arrived on Sunday afternoon, all 4 of them. This time, there was no knock. Just the doorbell, followed by the unmistakable rhythm of nervous feet shifting on the porch. Through the lace curtain, I saw them. Patricia holding a tray wrapped in foil, Sadie and Emily standing close together, Gregory just behind, his mouth tight. I waited a full 10 seconds before opening. Hi, Grandma, Sadie said quickly, stepping forward to hug me. I let her. She held on longer than usual. Emily offered a small wave. Hi. Gregory cleared his throat. Can we come in? I stood aside. You're here already. Patricia entered last, her eyes scanning the house as if it might look different under judgment. I made chicken pot pie, she said. Your favorite, I think. I nodded once. We'll see. They all sat, stiff and fidgeting, on the living room couch. The same one they passed every time they used to stop by for 5-minute visits, dropping off obligations like birthday cards with no notes inside. The pie sat unopened on the coffee table. Steam had already begun to fade. Sadie, bless her, was the first to speak. Grandma, we didn't mean to be rude at dinner. I guess we didn't think. I'm sorry, Emily echoed. Same. I didn't even notice what was happening, to be honest. I believed them. Children usually tell the truth when adults are busy covering it up. Gregory leaned forward. We've been talking. A lot. And I think we understand now how this all must have felt for you. Last Christmas. And maybe before that too. I looked at him, letting the silence stretch. Patricia jumped in. You've done so much for us. We've taken it for granted. That's not right. We know that now. I said nothing. And maybe we didn't handle the house situation well, she continued, voice trembling with forced vulnerability. But we want to make it right. Maybe we could work something out. A lease, like you said. Rent. Fair terms. I stood and walked to the sideboard, opening the drawer where I kept the updated documents. I returned and placed the folder on the table, but didn't open it. That's what I asked for, I said. Not apologies, not pie, just acknowledgement and respect. Patricia nodded quickly. Of course. Gregory shifted. But do we have to go through the lawyer? I mean, we're family. I looked at him flatly. We are. And yet it took legal documents for you to see me again. That silenced him. Sadie looked from her father to me. Does this mean you're not kicking us out? No, I said gently. I'm giving your parents a chance to act like adults, not squatters. Emily turned red. Gregory looked down. Patricia swallowed hard. Can we stay for tea? Patricia asked almost too brightly. The pie is still warm. I paused, then nodded once. I'll put on the kettle. As I moved about the kitchen, I heard them whispering. Low, urgent. I didn't eavesdrop. I didn't care. When I returned, I served the tea without ceremony. No china, no holiday sugar cookies, just plain mugs and a plate of crackers. We sat in awkward sips and shallow conversation. Sadie told me about a school play. Emily mentioned her college applications. Patricia asked if I still went to church. Gregory said little. When the cups were empty, they stood. No one reached for a second helping of pie. Thank you for letting us come, Patricia said. We mean it. I nodded once. We'll be in touch, through Martin. Sadie hugged me again. Emily followed. Gregory hesitated, then offered a soft, "Bye, Ma." As they stepped off my porch, I watched them walk to the car. They looked smaller than before, not defeated, but unsure. And for once, I didn't feel like the one being left behind. I closed the door and turned the lock. They had come bearing offerings, but I had brought something far more valuable to that table. Boundaries. It didn't take long for the masks to slip. By Wednesday, the tone had changed again. The messages started out polished, as if they were dictated by a PR firm rather than a son and his wife. Gregory emailed first. Mother, we've reviewed the lease terms Martin sent. While we appreciate the opportunity to remain in the house, the rent amount seems excessive, given that we've already contributed to maintenance and improvements over the years. We'd like to suggest a revised agreement, one that reflects our shared history and family values. I didn't respond. The next morning, Patricia called, twice. Left voicemails on both my landline and cell. Hi, Helen. Just following up. The girls are really confused. They don't understand why Grandma's being so formal, and I don't know what to tell them. I'm trying my best here, but it's hard when you're acting like we're strangers. Still, I said nothing. That evening, the gloves came off. Gregory called just before 9. I let it ring out, but this time he left no message. Only a text. If this keeps up, we'll have to reevaluate your access to the girls. There it was. Not even subtle. It didn't come as a surprise. Not really. I'd been waiting for it. Still, I sat very still for a long time after reading it. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't afraid. I was simply done. I picked up the phone and called Martin. He answered on the second ring. Helen? I think it's time we finalize the lease, I said. Send it certified, and I want to add a clause. He waited. If payment isn't received by the 1st of the month, we proceed to vacate. No extensions, no excuses. Martin didn't ask why. He simply said, understood. We spoke for another 10 minutes. I hung up, satisfied. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I took out my stationery and wrote 2 letters. One to Sadie, one to Emily. Not emails, not texts. Letters. In Sadie's, I told her how proud I was of her school play. How I remembered the first time she sang to me in the garden at age 6. I reminded her that love isn't proven by sides taken in arguments, but by how we show up for one another when it counts. In Emily's, I talked about college dreams and how I hoped she would never forget the importance of standing on her own 2 feet, not on borrowed foundations. I ended both letters the same way. No matter what happens between your parents and me, you are always welcome in my home. My door and my heart remain open to you, freely, without condition. I mailed them the next morning. That afternoon, Gregory came to my house again, alone. No blazer this time, no pie, just anger. He didn't even wait for an invitation to speak. "You're really going through with this?" he said. "Yes." His jaw tightened. "You've put our family under a microscope. You've made me look like some spoiled kid living off his mother. You did that part yourself." He stepped closer. "The girls are devastated. They think you hate them, that you're punishing them." "I sent them letters this morning," I said. "You're welcome to read them if they share them. I think you'll find I said nothing of the sort." He paused, momentarily thrown off. "Patricia's threatening to move out," he added, softer now. "She says she won't live in a house that's being held over our heads." "Then move," I said simply. "You're not prisoners. You never were. You've just mistaken generosity for obligation." He looked like he wanted to shout. Instead, he lowered his voice to something darker. "Do you want to die alone, Ma?" he asked. "Because this is how it happens. Old women making enemies of their own blood. People talk. They forget you. And one day, no one's left to answer the phone." I stared at him a long moment. Then I stepped forward, just once, and looked him in the eye. "You already forgot me once," I said. "When I sat at your table and you acted like I didn't exist. I've lived through that kind of alone. And I survived." He broke eye contact first. When he left, he didn't slam the door. Just pulled it shut behind him with a quiet click. But that quiet told me everything. I had been heard, and I would not be moved. The quiet after Gregory's visit lingered like fog. It didn't unsettle me. Not anymore. If anything, I welcomed it. A stillness free from expectation, noise, and half-hearted apologies. That night, I sat by the fireplace with my ledger open, flipping through the neat columns of numbers, payments, and dates. I had kept records all my life, not because I didn't trust people, but because I trusted myself. The figures spoke louder than Gregory ever had. Wanted $200 for their roof repair in 2012. $3,000 for Sadie's orthodontics. $2,500 for Patricia's business course that she never completed. $980 every year in homeowners insurance, a home not even registered in their name. I never sent an invoice, never asked for reimbursement. I told myself I was doing what mothers do, what good women do. And now, at 78, I finally understood. Good doesn't mean silent. I closed the ledger and reached for the folder Martin had prepared. Inside was a new set of documents, a trust agreement. We'd drafted it over the past few weeks, quietly, steadily. I hadn't said yes until today. But something in Gregory's last visit, his threat disguised as concern, his belief that loneliness was worse than disrespect, made the decision final. This wasn't about punishment. It was about legacy. I wanted what David and I built to go to someone who saw me, not someone who saw through me. The house on Carver Hill would go to Emily, not because she earned it. She was too young yet to earn something so large, but because she was the only one who still had time to grow into the kind of woman who remembered where she came from. She didn't sneer. She didn't ask. She just stood awkwardly in my doorway 2 weeks ago, whispering, "Hi, Grandma." as if it still meant something. That was enough. The next morning I called Martin. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask which part. He knew. We scheduled a signing date. I asked for 2 witnesses. I wanted it done quietly, without ceremony, without spectacle. When I hung up, I felt no fear, no regret, just breath. Full, steady breath. That afternoon, I wrote a second letter, this one to Emily, not mailed, not yet, but ready. "Dear Emily, I want you to read this in full before you react. I'm putting something in your name, something large, something that comes with history and weight, not to burden you and not to buy your affection, but because I believe in your decency. The house on Carver Hill will be yours, held in trust until you are ready to manage it. This is not a gift. It's a responsibility, one I trust you to carry with grace. I don't expect you to move in. I don't expect you to rescue anyone. What I expect is that you remember the value of what's built slowly and quietly. One day, when I'm no longer here, this house may offer you something more than shelter. A lesson, a mirror, a root. Take care of it. Love, Grandma." I tucked the letter into a drawer. Not yet. The time would come. By nightfall, I saw their car again. They didn't come to the door, just parked outside for a few minutes, engine running. Maybe they were deciding whether to try again. Maybe they already knew they'd lost. I didn't move from my chair. Let them wait. Let them learn. Let them understand that dignity is not a resource you can borrow or steal or guilt your way into keeping. It is earned, or it is lost. And I had just reclaimed mine. I hadn't looked at David's things in years, not because it hurt, though it did, but because the pain had become something familiar, like a stone at the bottom of a well. Always there, settled, unmoving. But that night, after I signed the trust papers with Martin, after I sealed the letter to Emily and placed it in my dresser, I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were the pieces of our life. David's flannel jacket, worn at the elbows. A box of photographs wrapped in rubber bands. The black ledger from our first year running the appliance repair shop. And the envelope, yellowing now, with the deed to the Carver Hill house folded neatly behind David's last will. I lifted the ledger and sat on the bed. The first entry was dated March 12, 1972. Mrs. Kinsey's dryer, $15, replaced belt. The handwriting was unmistakably David's, precise, humble, confident. He was never a man of many words, but his numbers were always honest. I ran my hand over the ink like it was his skin. That shop was our beginning. Not much, just a dusty corner of a garage, a workbench, and a pot of coffee we brewed on a camping stove. He handled repairs. I handled customers, books, and deliveries when needed. We didn't dream big. We just wanted enough. And over the years, we built a life on that. Not on inheritance, not on shortcuts, but on early mornings and sore backs. When Gregory was born, we took turns. One of us worked while the other watched him. He used to sleep under the counter wrapped in a blanket, his tiny legs sticking out like roots from a tree. He was a sweet boy, earnest, always asking questions, always trying to help. When did he change? I tried to find the moment. Was it high school, when he started calling us old-fashioned? When he refused to join the shop and chose accounting instead? Was it Patricia, with her bright smile and sharper tongue? Or was it me? Too generous, too forgiving. David used to say, "If you let people treat you small, they'll forget you were ever tall." I didn't listen. I told myself I was being patient, that they'd come around, that families go through seasons, but some winters stay. I looked at the deed again. Our names. The purchase price. He won $18,000. We'd saved 5 years to make the down payment. Gregory had just gotten engaged. He was panicked about money, worried he wouldn't afford anything decent. David suggested we buy the house outright and let them live in it until they got on their feet. "He'll appreciate it," he said. "You watch." I watched. I watched them remodel the kitchen without asking. Watched them remove the old rose bushes I planted, calling them too old-fashioned. Watched Gregory forget birthdays, then forget to call at all. And I watched myself shrink, year after year, into something quiet and convenient. David died in that shrinking. A third heart attack. He'd been carrying the ladder, fixing the roof. Gregory was supposed to come that weekend, but called the day before to cancel. "Work emergency," he said. I didn't tell him about the ladder until the funeral. Even then, I softened the story. Because that's what I did. I softened things. Until now. I put the ledger back into the chest. Folded the jacket. Closed the lid. In the hallway, I passed the family photos. One in particular caught my eye. Gregory, age 9, arms around my neck, cake frosting on his cheek. I was laughing. David's hand rested on my shoulder, just out of frame. We looked full, whole. But that child no longer existed, and neither did the woman who would have forgiven him without question. I turned off the light and returned to my room. There would be no more softening. Not now. Not ever again. It was just after 3 in the afternoon when I heard the knock. Not rushed or heavy, just a gentle rhythm, like someone unsure whether they should be here at all. I opened the door to find Emily standing alone on my porch. No car in sight. No jacket, just a hoodie and a backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hi, Grandma," she said. I stepped aside. "Come in." She moved quietly, brushing snowflakes from her sleeves. Her eyes were wide, uncertain. "I didn't tell them I was coming," she said, sitting down at the kitchen table without waiting for an invitation. I took the bus. I poured her tea. Didn't ask questions, just waited. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. My letter. It was worn now, soft at the edges like it had been read more than once. "I got this 2 days ago," she said. "I didn't know what to do with it. I showed it to Sadie. She told Dad. He freaked out." I said nothing. Let the words settle. "He said you were turning your back on the family, that you were making things up, blowing everything out of proportion." "Is that what you think?" Emily shook her head. "I don't know what to think." I took a breath. "Then I'll tell you. I started at the beginning, not just the dinner, but before that. The house, the purchase, the years of covering their bills, their debts, their promises. I told her about the title, the trust, the lawyer, and the silence. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize. Just the facts, steady and plain. She listened without interrupting, her fingers wrapped tight around the mug. "Why didn't they tell us?" she asked, voice thin. "Why did they pretend it was theirs?" "Because people believe what's convenient, and because I let them." She stared at the steam rising from her tea. "I thought we were this perfect family. I mean, messy, yeah, but solid. Like, everyone has their quirks, right?" I gave a soft, sad smile. "Sweetheart, what you saw was surface. The quiet resentment, the comments, the distance. I absorbed all of that. Quietly. Because I thought that's what mothers did. But why now?" she asked. "Why decide now to change everything?" "Because I looked around that table on Christmas night," I said, and realized I was sitting with strangers who thought I was furniture. Useful, but not human. Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away quickly. "I didn't know it was that bad," she whispered. "I know you didn't." She nodded slowly. "And the house. You're really giving it to me?" I reached into the side drawer and pulled out the second copy of the trust paperwork. Placed it on the table. "It will remain in trust until you're ready," I said. "Not to use against them. Not to gloat. But because I believe you're still growing into the kind of woman who won't let this kind of forgetting happen again." Emily stared at the folder like it was too bright to touch. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," I said gently. "Just understand what it means. You are not responsible for what your parents did, but you are responsible for what comes next." She sat in silence for a long time. Then, finally, she reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not seeing it sooner." I squeezed her fingers. "You're here now. That's enough." We talked for another hour. About school, about her fears, about what it means to stand between two generations without falling into either. When she left, she hugged me hard, the kind of hug that says, "I'm not letting go next time." She walked to the bus stop with her hood up, letter in her pocket, and I stood by the window, watching her go. Not out of fear this time, but with quiet hope. The kind that doesn't need words. The pen didn't feel heavy. I expected it to. I'd imagined this moment more times than I could count. The trust folder open on the table, Martin sitting across from me, the sound of the clock ticking in the corner. But when the time came, there was no thunder, no trembling, just ink and decision. "You're sure?" Martin asked, not for the first time. I met his eyes. "Yes." He turned the papers toward me, one at a time. The final draft of the trust, naming Emily Atwood, the sole beneficiary of the Carver Hill property, effective upon my passing, or sooner, should I choose. It was clean, tight, unambiguous. I signed my name at the bottom of the first page. Then the next. Then the next. Martin nodded, collecting each sheet carefully. "That's it." I leaned back in my chair. The weight I expected in the pen had settled in my chest instead. But it wasn't a burden. It was a kind of release. Outside, the sky was overcast. The trees in the yard had lost most of their leaves. I watched a squirrel dart across the fence line, tail high, determined. Martin packed his briefcase. "They'll be notified officially by mail. If Gregory or Patricia have questions, they'll have to come through me." "They won't like that." "No," he said with a half smile. "But they don't have to." I poured him a cup of tea before he left, a habit I couldn't break even now. He didn't drink it, just held it in his hands for warmth. "Do you want to talk about how this ends?" he asked. I shook my head. "It doesn't end. It just continues on different terms." He understood. He always had. When he left, I sat alone with the empty teacup and the echo of old decisions finally made whole. I didn't feel powerful. I felt right. Rooted. I stood and walked to the front closet, pulled out the quilt I'd made the year Emily was born. Navy and cream, hand-stitched over that long winter after David died. I hadn't given it to her then. Patricia said it didn't match the nursery's theme, but I'd kept it, folded in tissue, waiting for the right moment. Now I placed it in a box, gently, with the trust document sealed in an envelope beside it. No note, no performance, just facts and warmth. I wrote Emily's name in neat black letters on the lid. Then I walked to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. Sat at the table, ate in silence. Not out of sadness, but because silence now was mine. Mine and no one else's. The first letter came certified. A thick white envelope from a law office I didn't recognize. Not Martin's. Gregory's name was nowhere on it, but I didn't need a signature to know who sent it. I opened it slowly, standing by the kitchen sink. The letter inside was 4 pages long, printed on high-weight paper, full of phrases like family equity, undue influence, and implied transfer of ownership. At the bottom, a request to initiate formal mediation. Not a demand, not a lawsuit. A request. They were testing the water, seeing if I'd flinch. I didn't. Instead, I slid the letter back into its envelope, wrote forward to Martin Holloway across the front, and dropped it in the outgoing mail slot. 3 days later, Martin called. "They don't have a case," he said. "Nothing enforceable. The house has always been in your name. There's no evidence of transfer, verbal or otherwise. No payments, no agreements. They're reaching." "Let them reach," I said. "I'm not extending my hand anymore." He chuckled. "That's what I told their attorney. She wasn't pleased." "They hired a woman?" I asked, surprised. "Yes. Young. Efficient. The kind who bills by the quarter hour and wears sharp shoes." "Patricia's doing," I said. "She always thought female lawyers made things less confrontational." Martin laughed again, softly. "Well, she picked the wrong old woman to confront." We hung up. For a week there was silence. No calls, no visits, no new letters. Then came the second attempt, not from a lawyer, but a mediator. A woman named Rachel called my house directly, said she specialized in helping families preserve relationships while resolving conflict. She had a kind voice, practiced and sweet, like someone who'd read a book on empathy and highlighted every third word. I let her speak. After 10 minutes, I said gently, "Rachel, dear, do you have children?" "Yes, a daughter. She's 10. Then I hope one day, when she grows up and forgets how to speak to you with kindness and tries to take something she never earned, you'll remember this call." And hang up. I placed the phone on the receiver before she could reply. The next morning, another letter arrived. This time it was shorter. Just 1 page. It read, "Given the current legal posture and emotional strain, Gregory and Patricia Atwood have decided to disengage from further legal action. Please consider this their final position, barring material change. Signed, E. Witt and Associates Translation." They gave up. It didn't feel like victory. Not in the way movies pretend it does. No celebratory music. No vindication. Just a slow exhale. The fight was over. Later that day, I saw their car pass the end of my street. They didn't stop. Just kept driving. I stood at the window, arms crossed, watching them disappear behind a line of bare trees. Let them go. Let them live in whatever truth they've built around themselves. I didn't need them to see mine anymore. The first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not the tense kind that follows an argument. Not the hollow kind that creeps into rooms when people stop calling. This quiet was different. Whole. Settled. It was mine. I made my breakfast slowly that morning. Oatmeal with sliced banana and cinnamon. No rush, no lawyer's calls to expect. No letters to read twice for subtext. Just the spoon in the bowl, the hum of the kettle, the soft creak of the house waking up. For the first time in months, I opened the curtains in the living room wide. The winter sun was pale but honest. It lit the dust motes in the air like little dancers. I didn't reach for the duster. I let them be. After breakfast, I took a walk. Nothing ambitious, just a few blocks, the same route David and I used to take after supper when the shop was still open and Gregory was still small enough to wave at us from the window. The sidewalks were cracked in places, and the neighborhood was quieter than it used to be. Young families had moved in over the years. I passed a toddler bundled into a stroller, his mother murmuring into a phone, not noticing me. That was fine. I wasn't looking to be seen, just present. When I returned, I boiled water for tea and sat at the kitchen table with my knitting basket. I hadn't touched it in a long time. The needles had slid to the bottom, half a scarf still looped on one side. Dust in the corner of the basket. I didn't even remember what color yarn I'd used. Something deep green, soft. I ran it through my fingers and thought, I could finish this now. And not for anyone. Not for a birthday or a thank you or an apology. Just to finish. At noon, I made a sandwich. Ate it in the sunniest spot in the house. No phone beside me. No papers. Just the sandwich and the quiet. And the view of the backyard, where the garden beds slept beneath thin patches of snow. It had been years since I really saw that garden. Years since I stood still long enough to feel its rhythm. When David died, I threw myself into routine. Grocery lists, church committees, doctor appointments. It felt like movement. It looked like coping, but it was hiding. I'd been hiding from the silence because I thought silence meant loss. Now, I understood it differently. Silence was what remained when everyone else's noise fell away. By mid-afternoon, I began tidying the spare room. I wasn't sure why at first, just habit maybe. But as I straightened the bookshelf and shook out the curtains, I realized I wanted a space ready. Not for Gregory, not for Patricia, for Emily. One day, if she ever needed it. A quiet room, a place to stay, a place to remember she wasn't alone. It would be here. On her terms. Not obligation, not guilt. Just shelter. When I finished, I sat on the edge of the bed. The window overlooked the street. I watched the wind move the trees. I thought of David, of his quiet strength, his careful hands, the way he never doubted me, even when I doubted myself. He would have been proud of how I handled things. Not because I stood up to Gregory, but because I finally stood up for myself. It was never about the house. Not really. It was about being seen, heard, counted. I went to bed early that night, not from exhaustion, but from peace. The house didn't feel empty. It felt earned. It was just after 5 when I heard the knock. Not hurried, not hesitant, steady. 3 taps, then a pause. I opened the door to find Emily again. This time she wasn't alone. A small suitcase stood beside her, her backpack slung low, and her face, quiet but calm. "Hi, Grandma," she said. "Can I stay for a few days?" I stepped aside. "You don't have to ask." She rolled the suitcase inside and slipped off her boots without a word. No explanations. No nervous glances toward a car waiting outside. She'd come on her own. In the kitchen, I reheated soup from the night before, poured 2 bowls. She sat at the table, hands wrapped around the mug of tea I handed her. "I told them I was visiting a friend," she said, eyes on the steam rising from her cup. "They didn't ask which one." I nodded. "Will they be angry?" "They're always angry lately," she said. "But it passes." We ate in silence, not because we had nothing to say, but because we didn't need to rush it. After dinner, I showed her the spare room, now freshly made, the curtains clean, the books dusted. She smiled when she saw the quilt folded on the foot of the bed. "You made this?" "Years ago," I said. Was saving it for someone who'd keep it warm. She ran her hand over the stitching. It's beautiful. That night, she stayed up reading on the couch while I finished my crossword in the armchair. We didn't speak much, just shared the quiet. It felt like something old returning, not the past itself, but the part of it worth keeping. The next morning, we had eggs and toast and walked to the corner store. I hadn't done that with anyone in years. She carried the bag on the way back, telling me about her favorite teacher, the girl she roomed with last semester, how the dining hall coffee was basically punishment. I laughed more than I expected to. In the afternoon, she helped me reorganize the pantry. We found cans with faded labels, jars I'd forgotten I owned. She teased me gently, the way David used to. Not cruel, just enough to let me know she saw me as real. You're not like them, I said, almost without meaning to. Emily paused. I don't want to be. She looked at me then, really looked. I love them, but I think they're stuck in their own version of things. Like they built this little world where everything that's hard gets blamed on someone else. I folded a dish towel. They've had practice. I let them. You're not anymore. No, I said. Not anymore. That night, she sat on the floor beside the fire, flipping through old photo albums. Who's this? She asked, pointing to a faded Polaroid of David in his work apron, holding a wrench and grinning like a man who just fixed the world. Your grandfather, I said. That was taken the day we signed the papers on the shop. He came home covered in grease and wouldn't wash until I took a picture. Emily smiled. He looks happy. He was. We didn't have much, but we knew what mattered. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I think that's what I want. Something that matters. Not just stuff. Not just keeping up with everyone else. You'll find it, I said. You're already closer than you think. Later, after she went to bed, I sat in the living room alone and looked at the fire until it softened to embers. No letters, no ultimatums, no threats, just warmth, just presence. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't holding the house up by myself. She hadn't come to fix anything. She'd just come, and that, in the end, was everything. Emily left on a Thursday. No drama, no tears, just a quiet morning, a packed bag, and a hug that held everything we hadn't said out loud. I'll call when I get there, she said, brushing hair from her eyes. And I'll come back next month, okay? You don't have to promise, I said. I want to. She smiled then, a small, certain smile. The kind that told me she wasn't walking away from something, but toward herself. I watched her walk down the drive, backpack slung low, the morning wind tugging at her coat. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. The house settled around me again, not heavier, not emptier, just mine. The mailbox was quiet that week. No more certified envelopes, no more legalese, just a grocery flyer and a church bulletin. Inside, I moved slower, not because I was tired, but because I didn't need to rush toward anything anymore. The rooms felt honest again, no performance, no tension. One morning, I made muffins for no one. I opened the windows, even though it was cold. Let the air move through the space like it belonged here. I found myself humming as I washed dishes. I hadn't done that since David passed. Not because I'd forgotten how, but because there hadn't been anything worth humming to. Now, there was. On Sunday afternoon, the phone rang. I let it ring twice before answering. Ma. It was Gregory, his voice flat, as if someone made him call. I just wanted to say, I got the notice from Martin. About the trust. Emily told us. I waited. She didn't have to, he added quickly. She just did. Thought we should know. Still, I said nothing. She's confused. She thinks you gave her the house because we made you feel small, like you were nothing to us. I spoke then, evenly. I gave her the house because you taught me what forgetting looks like. She reminded me what being remembered feels like. He was silent. I'm not angry anymore, I said, but I am finished. A pause. Then, do you still want to see the girls? I'll leave that to them. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He simply said, okay, and hung up. And that was that. A week later, a package arrived. No return label. I opened it to find a worn cookbook, mine, but older. Pages marked with notes in my handwriting. It had gone missing years ago. Inside the front cover, in Emily's handwriting. Thought this should come home. Tucked in the pages was a note. I made your lemon loaf for my roommate. She cried. Said it tasted like something her grandmother used to bake. Just thought you should know you still make people feel at home. I closed the book slowly. My hands, old as they are, still remembered every fold of that recipe, still carried warmth. That was enough. Winter eased little by little. The garden thawed. The light lingered longer in the evenings. I planted new bulbs, not out of tradition, but because I wanted to. One afternoon, while kneeling in the dirt, I heard a voice behind me. Can I help? It was Sadie, taller than I remembered, older. She didn't hug me, didn't speak in apologies, just knelt beside me and began digging. We worked in silence for a while, side by side. Then she asked, "Is this the same garden you planted when Dad was little?" "Yes." She nodded. I thought so. And that was enough. Sometimes dignity looks like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. But more often, it looks like planting something new in soil that once went untended. It looks like handing over keys without bitterness, like silence that holds peace, not punishment, like saying no and meaning it. I don't need to be remembered as generous. I don't need a legacy of sweetness. I want to be remembered as someone who saw clearly and still chose what mattered. Not who needed me, not who owed me, but who looked me in the eye and didn't look away. If this story found you, then maybe you felt it too. The slow erasure, the quiet disrespect, the forgetting. You don't need to shout to take your place back, but you do need to stand. Start there. And if it's time to plant something new, something that belongs to you, do it. Even if your hands shake, do it anyway.